You're completely wrong about why you hate Starfield is an action role-playing game developed by Bethesda Game Studios and released in 2023. The game is set in an expansive open-world space environment, allowing players to explore various planets, customize their characters, build their own spacecraft, and make choices that influence the game's narrative. The game combines traditional role-playing elements with a detailed and immersive science fiction setting, promising a vast and diverse experience for players. This is basically all just ChatGPT. I told you, motherfuckers, the internet was dead.
BZZT, this is where Starfield KZZT.
I don't like writing copy. We're all gonna die anyway. I'm actually using duct tape to stop the sunlight from shining through. I'm sure there's a better way of doing that, but I'm hoping Dan Olsen sees it and it just drives him insane.
What did you say?
I don't know, maybe he winds up doing a whole video essay where he reads me for filth.
Bespoke inefficiencies.
Now you might be thinking, Chris, the death of video games? A little dramatic, don't you think? You sure are talking about death a lot on your channel. Are you doing all right, buddy? I don't know, maybe I'm not. Maybe after each successful video, I have a crisis about how to replicate it. So instead of trying to replicate it, I'm just gonna do something low stakes and chill, but with a title that screams, please, don't abandon me. How are we liking this self-awareness? Is it good for you? Starfield is a symptom, not the problem. The problem is multifaceted. Look, none of us like where the video games industry is headed, but Mr. Waves, I hear you say. The medium of video games is not dead. It is clearly functioning. To which I say, while the medium of games is alive and well, because of how the industry works right now, individual games are consistently fighting for life. Often for the same reasons you and I are drowning in a Steam backlog and, you know, content in general. So many games to play, and most of them are okay. It's okay. They're fine. It's fine. It's fine.
It was pretty good. It was all right. It wasn't great, but it was fine. And I knew that it was going to be fine.
I mean, the marketplace is broken. Storefronts are constantly updated with junk. Asset flips, free to play, add-ons to add-ons, reissues, and just mediocrity. The quality control is not good. Movie and television fans, sound familiar? Also, when it comes to video games, the games media apparatus is incredibly shallow and lightning fast. There are obviously big exceptions to this, and I'm going to talk about them later, but for now, I'm just sort of generally speaking. Whether it's old school blog style reviews, Twitch streams, or video breakdowns of the latest AAA game or indie curio, it's all coming at you at once. Deep dives get lost in the fray, and then it's on to the next shiny product. Newly released games have to get noticed in this atmosphere, or otherwise die. But it's not just that. I would go further to say that a game or work of art that truly lives isn't just one that gets recognized, or widely played, or well reviewed. It's one that gets seen, like really seen. Some games are brilliant and belong in the broader cultural lexicon, and they don't get to be because of the aforementioned mechanisms. Like, why did everyone sleep on Klaus? Klaus was f***ing awesome. And some games are bad. And they too need to be seen because we need to get something positive out of analyzing why they're bad. But like, beyond its mechanical badness. See, that's another way to look at the death of video games. If the discourse surrounding games prioritizes fun over depth, function over form, style over substance, then the medium doesn't evolve. It stagnates and dies. And to be sure, there are lots of really great in-depth analyses of games, but let's be real. What we mostly get is
the gunplay in Starfield is by far the best Bethesda has offered, especially when I was zipping
Why does it not run that great? If it doesn't run or look that great, why doesn't it
10%
load
chance to set nearby attackers on fire and made me invisible when I crouched and held still. That's kind of cool. And there's a lot
the game
more
had DLSS 3, I'd have been running at 90 FPS, but you know, Bethesda likes money more than it likes his players,
especially when I was
guess.
zipping around firefights with my jetpack
Sorry, did you
while
want to get
swapping
immersed
between
in our
tricked out
world?
laser
Yeah, well,
rifles
guess
and
what?
auto-shotguns.
Every
Fucking
issue people have with this
pronouns!
game can be boiled down to
Fucking
wanting a
gender
BGS game
ambiguity!
to be something they have never been.
I would rather put my own dick in a meat grinder than launch the game again.
This is unfortunately how we treat most of our content these days. We review it as a product, like it's a toy, rather than an artifact of human expression.
Because that's all we fucking know! Because we're boring!
And that's not always a bad thing.
Twat waffle!
It's good to know whether or not the game you're engaging with is going to be worth your time and money, because time is all we have, and money is how you pay for it. And also, paradoxically, time is money. So yeah, I'm gonna want to know if your game is engaging or not, expensive or not, and whether or not it respects my time. Looking at you, Elden Ring.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
And it's especially good if you elevate your product analysis beyond just a consumer perspective. Like, Is the art that you're engaged with built on abuse and exploitation? Or is the art that you're supporting engaged in predatory tactics? And can I just say, no big studio, big publisher game needs to be $70 to $100. I promise you, the industry worth billions isn't hard up for cash. So yes, product analysis is a good, healthy practice, especially when done with a solid critical framework. But it's not enough. We gotta go deeper. And many writers and content creators in the game space do. But we don't talk about them now in the video, we talk about them later. Now we talk about Starfield. It's janky, infamously so.
You got time for a quick chat? I'd appreciate it when you're able.
Just some of the charges against Starfield are as follows. It's a sprawling open-world sci-fi exploration game in which the planets that you land on have almost nothing to do. Planets are vast and empty, save for collectibles and a few copy-pasted structures that are inexplicably replicated across a vast galaxy. Like the same exact 3 buildings over and over again, just with a different skin. And in order to get from planet to planet, you have to go through an absurd series of loading screens and ship animations. You gotta get on your ship, go to the cockpit, select your planet, hit fast travel, get out of your cockpit, leave the ship, and trudge across emptiness to your next mission objective. And so many of the side quests are just fetch quests, or glorified dungeon crawls with just a little bit of lore to sustain you. This sounds bad, right? But I'm not talking about Starfield. I am literally describing Mass Effect 1. It's the same jank, but that's wild because Mass Effect 1 is a game that is near universally celebrated by anyone with 2 thumbs connected to a heart. So why can Mass Effect get away with it, but Starfield can't? Is it because it was released like 15 years earlier to different technological expectations? No! It's because Starfield is ostensibly about exploring the universe, the wonders of that exploration, and the infinite possibilities of the self contained within a multiverse plot.
This is an explorers group, right?
And Mass Effect fucking isn't. Mass Effect is about engaging with the galaxy and finding it cold, mysterious, sinister, and lonely, contrasted only by the warmth that you find with the people you connect with. It's about that narratively speaking. So lifeless, rote, hollow planet exploration supports the cosmic horror vibe.
Rudimentary creatures of blood and flesh, you touch my mind. Fumbling in ignorance.
Janky quests and copy-pasted structures take on an ominous feeling. And yes, I admit, a lot of this probably wasn't on purpose. Most of Mass Effect's jank, I believe, was due to budget constraints. Case in point, sometimes you just get a text pop-up at the end of missions with prose instead of an actual cutscene or even a conversation. But somehow, that's awesome because it makes the game feel lonelier. The jank elevates the text, making it all the more effective when you find out the actual villain of the story is a race of Lovecraftian demigods who have raised all known life as livestock and have now come to reap. But put those same mechanical elements within Starfield and they clash with that game's themes of wondrous discovery. That's why you don't like it. I think you don't like it on a deep subconscious level. You know there's a tension there that doesn't work. You wouldn't mind the jank if the jank was a vibe. Bethesda could fix all the mechanics that they're infamous for, or they could parlay them into bolstering an engaging atmosphere and narrative. That's their choice. I mean, they'd still need to fix their menu screens, but you get my point. If you're a creator of something, it's best to recognize your limitations and then use them to your advantage, to sculpt your creation to fit inside those limitations in an intentional way. What you shouldn't do is say, it'll be fine. The modding community will fix it. Look, I've been a Bethesda player since Fallout 3, and I still maintain that in some ways at least, it is a better game than New Vegas.
So brave.
It has all the same classic Bethesda-style cut corners as the rest of them. And the prevailing wisdom is that the Bethesda jank was forgiven because of how new and fresh Fallout 3 felt. And I think that is a big part of it. But also, in Fallout 3, as in Mass Effect 1, those shoddier, knackered elements of gameplay worked with the core theme. People forget this, but Fallout 3 was kind of scary. Not like a horror game scary, although sometimes it was like spooky scary. And its sillier, wackier elements, even the ones played for laughs, were still in support of a foreboding and sinister vibe.
Go! Gary.
So stilted character movements, off-kilter dialogue, and diegetically insane occurrences, like murdering a giant roach, eating its raw meat, and then talking to someone immediately after who doesn't bat an eye, felt almost congruent. That character stiffness elevated the uneasiness I felt when I first found a kind little village that turned out to be secret cannibals, or the people who imagined themselves as vampires living in the sewers, or the ghouls in the Museum of History. And it added an extra layer of hilarity to Moira's upbeat personality.
Huh. Did you know the human body can survive without the stomach or spleen? Oh, what's up?
And Bethesda didn't have the resources to litter its map with a million locations like they did in Fallout 4, so that meant a lot of your time in Fallout 3 was spent roaming around a really empty, really monotone wasteland, just like on Starfield's many planets. But in Fallout 3, when you got to where you were going, or when you ran into an interesting and unexpected encounter, it didn't just make that time spent wandering a vacuous wasteland worthwhile, it made it actively fun. In and of itself. I loved that emptiness because the elements that encircled it turned the absence of action into the presence of tension. And yes, some of the best quests in the game can be pretty difficult to find, Mr. H. Bomber Guy, but that just makes it all the more rewarding when you do, because the game is thematically about exploration, or at least the first half of it is, which is why the first half of Fallout 3's main quest feels better than the second half. I don't want to save the wasteland, I want to uncover mysteries as I barely survive in it. Starfield 2 is a game that is thematically about exploration, but unlike in Fallout 3, Starfield's mechanics and design decisions don't really support that. And neither does the actual narrative. And that is the really crucial part. This is something that's very well pointed out by Jessie Gender in her video, The Cyclical Failures of Bethesda's Bad Writing. If you got the time, go watch it. It's literally the best Starfield video on this godforsaken platform, because Jessie, gasp, actually seems to care about the story. In a game with a story. She expertly points out Starfield's narrative failings, both as a narrative unto itself and as a narrative in service to the core conceit of exploration. Starfield is relatively uninterested in exploring characters, especially your own player character, and it's completely uninterested in using basic literary functions to tell its story.
Starfield views every interaction as efficient and optimizable, from its story to its universe to its inhabitants. The relationships you form with any of them are not meaningful or enriching. They are just there to funnel you through, all to facilitate a specific experience, a specific story and narrative. They're just lifeless pieces to be used, not treated much differently from the gear you can collect or the sandwiches you can fill a spaceship with.
Why is it so rare to hear someone advocate for better, more cohesive, more literary narrative elements in games like this, and even this medium in general? And why are titles like Disco Elysium and Indica so hard to find? Two games which absolutely soar past the rather low literary standard for narrative games. They shouldn't be. Don't worry, I'm not suggesting that games like Starfield should aspire to be literary masterpieces. I understand that there's a whole market for games that tell meaningful, narrative-driven stories, and I could just go play one of those. But if I may, I want to draw your attention to how those types of games are often marketed to us. They're sold to us as emotional experiences. Embark on an emotional journey. Dive into an emotional narrative. Explore an emotional story. I hate this, because being emotional isn't the same thing as having substance. A 2-year-old is emotional. Your average 4chan troll is emotional. Alpha male podcasters are emotional. Give us money, we'll give you emotions. Now, obviously, this is just a marketing tactic, and marketing tactics reveal far more about how publishers view their consumer base rather than the consumer base itself or the game that they're selling. But I still feel that it's reflective of something significant about game design culture as a whole. While many developers are interested in telling mature, functional, nuanced narratives that access our emotions, precious few of them seem to be interested in using the capabilities of the medium itself in service of that goal, let alone pushing the limits of the medium, which is why I think so many emotional games are just walking simulators. They just check the box of interactivity. On the flip side, tons of developers that want to make fun games with interesting mechanics understand that they need a story to contextualize it, but don't really have ambitions for their narrative. So they just check the box of storytelling. Few games ever seek to explore the possibilities of both mechanics and narrative in tandem. In other words, to make form and function inseparable. And to be clear, I love a lot of walking simulator games. Some of them are my favorite of all time. But to my point, my favorite walking simulators are the ones in which their bare bones mechanics actually makes narrative sense and serve the themes. That's why Gone Home was so good. To fans of the channel, it is no secret that I think Disco Elysium reaches the heights that great literature can achieve. But it does this not just with its undeniably incredible writing, but with design that supports its themes and also happens to be legitimately innovative on top of that. Disco Elysium was interested in achieving its narrative ambitions using its mechanics, not in spite of its mechanics or in addition to them. I'm not saying every game has to have lofty storytelling aspirations. Games don't have to have stories at all. In fact, there is a common counter-argument directed at folks like me and Jesse Gender who are advocating for better literary elements in games like Starfield and like Bethesda in general. Yes, I did just put myself in the same category as JG. Haven't you heard? I'm the next big thing. Get in on the ground floor. Invest now. Like, subscribe, comment, go to my Patreon and empty your savings account. In all seriousness, your support is genuinely humbling. And if you decide to give it, thank you. You make me feel like Todd Howard on the top of his career.
The other kids in the block would say, you know, I'm going to play quarterback for the Cowboys. And I'd be like, I'm going to make video games and everyone's going to play them. Like, you dork. Go back to the chess club. Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.
So the counterpoint to those who decry Bethesda's lack of narrative cohesion and general prowess is basically, that's not what Bethesda games are about. Bethesda games aren't supposed to be deep narrative experiences. They're not supposed to be complex like Baldur's Gate 3. They're not supposed to be deep character studies like The Last of Us. The quests are meant to be fun little pastiches that provide a thin layer of contextual motivation to keep you engaged in the core gameplay loop.
Sir, what if a writer is attempting to create a story where nothing much happens?
Okay, so if Starfield isn't really about the story, if that's not the main point, how come there's so fucking much of it? There's so much of it! So much dialogue, so much chatter. How come there are all these companions with their own specific quest lines? Why bother with any of this? Clearly, the developers felt that story was needed, so why isn't it good? And even if you thought the story was good, why isn't it in harmony with the themes and experiences of the game itself? If we insist that games are art, shouldn't we care more about the quality of the stories in games that have them? What is Starfield trying to say? What is it trying to give me? What is the point of it?
And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie? I don't have any use for it. I don't have any bloody use for it.
I mentioned this before, but when I suggested that the game's media apparatus was shallow, I was being very overgeneral. There are so many excellent video essayists and writers who engage with the medium's literary and thematic capabilities in consistently thoughtful ways. They're artists unto themselves. Presumably, these creators understand that if you place an emphasis in discourse on the literary aspects of a medium, like video games, then you create a demand for those aspects to improve. That's good. That means you get better games that fuck your mind and make you feel. And you get games that are better at just delivering good old-fashioned fun, because they know how to thematically bind its elements. In other words, this kind of analysis pressures video games to evolve as an artistic medium, rather than stagnate and, well, die. I tied it back into the title of the video. Also, as a sidebar, engaging in literary analysis with games helps you become more aware of exactly what messages are being beamed into your little head. Do you know? Do you know what messages are being beamed into your little head? If you're watching this, you probably already agree that if you like a thing, analyzing it will not just increase your enjoyment, but also help you discover new things about yourself and new perspectives to adopt. If you dislike a thing, same deal. If you don't analyze the literary merits of the game, you will never fully understand why you like or dislike a thing without using that particular tool. I just think you get less out of it. It's like the difference between dumping a bucket of water over your head versus actually drinking the water. Sometimes you just want to dump a bucket of water over your head, and that could be fun and cool and refreshing, but drinking the water is what actually gives you the sustenance. I think we are much more accustomed to splashing around in our content and much less practiced at actually drinking from it. To further go with this metaphor, I think we're all like thirstier than we realize. And I think if you apply this kind of analysis to Starfield, you will likely come away with the conclusion that the problem isn't the game's limitations, but the way the game relates to those limitations. As a creator or just a person in the world, you need to learn to lean into your constraints, not pretend that they aren't there. Work with whatever it is that you can't yet make work. Allow decisions to flow from and harmonize with the imperfections you notice in yourself and your own creations. And then, of course, work to improve those imperfections. This takes time to master. Lord knows I'm still learning. But one thing that I can say for sure is that it requires you honing your vision.
I think our aspirations for that game, you know, it's the end-all be-all science fiction game that everyone's always wanted to play. Well,
where we could be the ones to pull this off.
This is super endearing, but also like the problem. Art and life isn't about the perfect realization of what's in your head. It's about the realized product of the clash between your aspirations and your reality. Great art and just great entertainment knows its boundaries. It strives to be something, not everything. Honestly, Fallout 3 might have been a fluke. Fallout 4 and Skyrim, for me personally, never seemed to access that same harmony between flaw and feature. I enjoyed those titles a lot, but in spite of the rough edges. So I'm beginning to wonder if the true mark of a Bethesda game isn't its jank, but its poor thematic cohesion, its inability to tell a story in harmony with its gameplay. And Fallout 3 was just the outlier. Still, I have to say that I got a lot out of my time with Bethesda games. Time is in short supply, but we still need to stop and just lose ourselves in something every once in a while. And Starfield in particular made me finally realize something. I'd rather get lost in a typically broken, classically janky Bethesda game that actually speaks to me than a perfectly polished, immaculately balanced, fully optimized Bethesda game with nothing to say.